What's up, guys? Nick here. I am a social studies teacher, teach econ and history at the American International School of Riyadh. This is just kind of the digital version of a little teaching teachers presentation I did on May 4th of 2025 to about 20 other faculty members. So kind of as a hook, I want to introduce people, if they've never seen this, to the product adoption curve. It was created by Everett Rogers. And the idea is that innovation disruptions have happened throughout history. And when those disruptions happen, you have the innovators early on, then early adopters, then eventually most people catch on, then the late majority kind of is forcefully integrates, and then finally the laggards, the skeptics, are forced to integrate as well. So we've seen this play out before AI. We've seen this with online education. In the 90s, not many people used the internet when teaching, right? It was only tech enthusiasts. Maybe you had some teachers that had a blog. Maybe they made like videos and shared them via email. But it wasn't many people. I can still recall a time when, if you asked someone or if you told someone you were learning online, they looked like you're crazy. Like what do you mean? I thought that was what people in jail did or something, So it's not really till the 2000s, right, where we begin to see a real mainstream shift. We begin to see things like Google Classroom become a natural part of the classroom. And then by the 2010s, those that maybe right back in the 90s were like, teaching is about, pen and pencil, right? It's person to person. They're forced to use tech. They're forced to use online, right? They're forced to use PowerSchool. And then eventually the real skeptics during COVID-19, they're going to get fired, right, if they don't teach online. So eventually we all used the internet for education. Right? There's a whole process. And with AI, it's interesting because we've seen this whole thing play out. With AI, we're still in the midst of it. And it's probably a quicker curve, though, because technology is moving quicker now. Where just 4 or 5 years ago, maybe you had seriously tech enthusiastic people, people who are very cutting edge or maybe trying out beta versions of various apps that were AI. But it's really only in the last year or two we're beginning to see big educational conferences really push forward AI. So we're beginning to get to the point where the early majority, right? A lot of people are integrating AI. For those who are watching this video, you're probably part of this early majority. And what will eventually happen is, like using the internet for education, conservatives will start to use it, right? Once it gets embedded, right, into things like Google Classroom. Right now, for example, if you use Google, right, it has AI, Gemini. So in the same way, there'll probably be some type of AI integrated to things like PowerSchool, Google Classroom, and eventually by 28, AI will just be part of, our daily lives, just like the way the internet is part of our daily lives. So I want to share with people today a few apps that will hopefully help them prepare their classes. So the first is slides, 2 types of ways, all at once or step by step. So I'll share with everyone the all at once method. There's a few, but my favorite is Gamma. Now Gamma, there's 3 ways to create the slides. Either you can copy paste text, you can give it a prompt, or this is the one I did for this example, import a file. So in the world history class I teach now, we're looking at the Cold War, and we have an 8-page PDF. So this was for 2 classes, I believe. And I like to make slides, right? It helps review the material, and it helps it kind of reinforce that information to students, but it can be quite time consuming. So I went ahead, I uploaded that PDF of the Cold War, and it only took 45 seconds, and I was able to make 10 slides, because that's the maximum for the free version, is 10 slides, which is fine, right, with an 8-page PDF. And this was the result. Nice and organized text, nice images. I really like this slide where it's kind of going in chronological order from 59 to 79 in Latin America. And when I saw this, I was impressed. I was like, wow, they got, licensing for JFK. Then I realized this isn't JFK, right? It's just an AI image of someone that looks like JFK. And then there's a few more slides like that. Now keep in mind, you can edit the text, which is, quite nice. So if you still want, have more creative control, you can always, add a sentence to this, modify that, etc. Now the method I've been using as of late is the DIY method. So this is where you can copy paste from ChatGPT, and you keep prompting it, reprompting it, reprompting it, reprompting it, and so forth. So what do I mean by reprompting? What I mean is Often people who are not AI savvy will say things like, hey, I asked AI to make, slides on, I'm just making this up, let's say like biology or something. And it was, it was too short. It was blah, blah. Well, the thing is, you can't just give it one prompt. You got to give it specific prompts. You got to do multiple prompts. So in this example, I start off with make me slides about the proxy war, and it's okay, but it's not great. So I gave it more specific prompt. I said this time I want 25 slides. Got to cover Afghanistan, Korea, Vietnam. I want it to have a primary source. I want it to include where it got its sources at the end, the final slide. And finally, I want a little warm up in the beginning. So this time it was a little better. Has a little warm up. Each slide is in slightly more detail. And I get to one of the slides I need to verify, which is this one, the primary source. So here's a quote from Truman, but I got to make sure this is real, right? Because AI can hallucinate. So it's up to us as the users to verify the original source. So what I'll do here is I'll click on the link, and guess what? No results found. So it's like, what the heck, right? GPT didn't give me a source that's there. So in that case, back to reprompting. I asked the AI, the slide 9 document is not there. Please find it or give me another document. So sure enough, it updated it, said my bad, and it gave me 3 places where I can find this speech by Truman. So I clicked on this first one, the one at the Truman Library, and this time we got it, right? The statement by the president. And that's a great example of how, initially, if you can't find it, just ask it again. And at the end here, it gave me where it made the first 24 slides from, and it was a aggregate of archives.gov, Reagan Library, and Truman Library. So those are all reputable places. Now, this is kind of the end product, right? So what I would do is I would take parts like, let's say slide 7, I'd copy paste the text and I copy paste the slide, then I put in a picture. It's obviously much slower than Gamma, but I like this because it gives me a little more creative control. Now, let's talk about Napkin. So I was only introduced this app about 3 days ago. Thank you to our curriculum coordinator, Amanda. And this is a really cool one. You paste and copy. So I paste your text. So for example, in IB Econ, we were talking about fiscal and monetary policies and how they affect aggregate demand. So I found a cool article in Investopedia, copy pasted it in. And then this isn't the exact text I used, but the point I want to highlight here is you just highlight the text that you want to use, and then you push that little blue button, and then boom, it creates infographics for you. So that's one example, comparing fiscal and monetary impacts. Here's another example, 5 components of aggregate demand. And this is just so cool because I can remember a time where you had to hire someone, right, for 2-3 hours to make an infographic like this. But now AI can produce it just like that. If you don't have the text, you can always ask it for the text too. So here I asked the AI to tell me about Saudi metro system. It took about 40 seconds to tell me key information. And then I just copy and paste, or not copy and paste, but highlighted certain parts. And I made these infographics. So this one is of the different lines. This one's of main stations. So again, very cool, fun one to play around with. Now, differentiating reading. So what inspired me to present differentiated reading is I love the New York Times. I'm not sure if there any of you watching read the Times, but we had an article for our grade 9 class that was from the New York Times, and I thought it was quite good. But after we read it, most of the students were like, I don't understand this. Like, the reading is really high level. So I checked what the Lexile level was, or I just copy pasted into GPT, and GPT said it's probably about 12th grade or like freshman, sophomore year of college. So it was too hard for them. So in this example, I want to present to you how a middle school student could perhaps read a New York Times article. So in this example, I have an article from the Times talking about Trump's recent tariffs. And let's say it's like a business class, 8th grade business. So I do want them to learn words like tariffs and bond markets, even though these are pretty hard words, difficult words. So what I can do here is I can copy and paste the text or upload the original PDF. So in this case, I'm just copy pasting the New York Times. And I told it, hey, can you make it for about 8th grade? But I also reminded it, don't change the words like tariffs and volatility, right? Don't make those words easier. If you're gonna use, I want you to use it and I want you to explain it. And the result was this. Now, I'm not going to read through all of this, But if you just kind of read this beginning here, it is much easier than what was in the Times. And furthermore, if you want to expand upon this, you can ask it to make worksheets, right? So that you really make sure students understand it. So I just asked AI to make some worksheets. And again, you have creative control, right? It's about reprompt, reprompt, reprompt. So you could, if you don't like the part 1, part 2, you can just say, just give me short answers, right? Or you can, if you don't like short answers, just MCQ and vocab, maybe as an exit ticket. And I mean, this is where us as teachers, right? This is where your skills kick in, right? You could figure out which questions are good, which questions do you not like. But the idea is velocity, right? If you can get it quicker, then you can narrow it down quicker and you can spend your time on other things like grading papers, etc., right? You're still using critical thinking, right? And the idea is to, speed up and make things easier, right? This is like your AI assistant. It's not doing all the work for you, right? You still have to. At the end of the day, your name is, behind this. So music is kind of a fun one, a little bit less clear in regards to how people could use it. But there's an app called Suno. This is where you can create music, and there's 2 ways of doing it. One is you just give it the prompt. You say, give me an acoustic song about World War I or something. The other way is a little more complex. You make your own lyrics. So the way I do that is I just use ChatGPT. I'll make lyrics for whatever, and I'll show you in a second. And then I can put it in any style, 80s power pop, hip hop, reggae, punk rock, and so forth. And that's a bit redundant. So those are the same things I just said. So let's actually look at a few. So I just have like a sample of 30 seconds each of things I used. So this actually I have an audio recording for this actually, so let me just go ahead and play it. First song was just like a fun little one I created by using the keywords that are on an upcoming major about the Cold War. And it's just like a fun little, way for them to review the terms.
Bad. Launch one nuke, the world goes bad. Peace by fear, no one shoots, just silence under missile boots. Cold War, no battlefield heat, but spies and threats on every street. Proxy war, others paid the price, like Korea and Nam. War ain't nice. Yalta Conference, World War End, split the world, tried to pretend. Potsdam, tension kicked in, new leaders, old foes couldn't win. Tehran Conference, war plan moves, alliance formed, wartime boots, propaganda goals sway the mind. Posters, films, control your kind.
So kind of similar concept here. The IB Econ kids had a test coming up, so I just incorporated a bunch of IB Econ terms into this song.
Yo, the Fed walks in like, what's the word? Open market ops getting absurd. Buying bonds, that's money boost. Liquidity flows, ADs let loose. Sell the bonds, pull cash out. Interest up, loans get drought. Raise the reserve, hike that rate. Monetary tools can shift your fate. Nominal rates, that surface level. Real means inflation gets disheveled. High rates, currency flex, but say goodbye to export checks. Inflation's hot, real wages burn. But deflation's a colder turn. Nobody spends, prices.
So this next one was like about my 9th grade section. So my youngest section, they actually liked it, which I thought was kind of cute. I think this would maybe be something more fun for like middle school, elementary school kids. So it's like just about the class.
Miles drops DC comic facts. His trivia hits like sneak attacks. Lars is shy but full of wit, knows more than he will ever admit. Marco joined us in the snow. From Prague to G, what else 7, now he's going pro.
So yeah, those are some examples of using that app, Suno. So I think I just have one more slide, or is that it? That might be it actually. Yeah, so I mean, the final point is just like, we have to think about the future, right? It's tempting for us to kind of drop back on what we did as students, or our knowledge from 10, 15 years ago. But let's say an 8th grader now, they're working at 2033. That's like when they're fresh into the workforce at 2033. 2050 is mid-career. At 2050 is when they're mid-career. So we as educators, like, if we really care about the future for these students, we really need to think, what does the world look like, right? 8 years from now, 20 years from now. And one way we can practice that, for example, 2033, is what was the world like 13 years ago? So I think the original I had for this was 2038. So let's just pretend that's 2038, and pretend this is third grade. But for third graders, that's in 13 years, right? So if we subtract, for example, 13 years ago from us, I mean, you're looking at a time when I remember cloud storage was like, I remember I was thinking, oh man, that's like something only high-tech people use. And now a lot of us use the cloud normally. Education, as I mentioned in the opening, like online learning was like, really looked down upon. I mean, still there's some stigma to it, but nowadays if someone's, working on a master's and they say, oh, I'm doing it online, I mean, people aren't like, oh, online, right? It's totally changed. And then when it comes to work, this is probably the one that's really been surprising to me the most, is if you talk to most people in their 20s now, to a certain degree early 30s, like a lot of them are working 2 days, 3 days at the office, right? That idea of 5 days at the office, 9 to 5 is dying out. And that's something unthinkable to me 10, 15 years ago. So that's how quick things move. They move very quickly. And that's why us as educators, especially educating these people who are going to be working at 2050, 2060, it's really our responsibility, right, to be up to times, right? We can't just be stuck in our old ways and say, well, it worked when it worked for us. Because the reality is the world is changing. I was actually just talking, I don't mean to ramble, but this is maybe my last point. I was just talking to a friend of mine who works in finance, and he was telling me how at Goldman Sachs, they used to have, first year, second year, third years do a lot of analyzing articles and then compiling reports of those articles and submitting that to their managers. And he was telling me kind of the most basic level of that is now just done by AI, because he says, well, why should we pay someone hundreds of thousands of dollars to analyze articles when an AI can do it, right? So this is in 2025. So the question now is, what is the world in 2030, 2035, 2040 going to look like? What are the skill sets that they need in the future? And the short answer is, I don't know. But what I do know is that AI is coming, and not only coming, but it's here. And the least we can do as educators is at least be well equipped and knowledgeable about this type of technology. Again, it's not like I like tech or I don't like tech, right? It's not I like AI, I don't like. It's more like, are you prepared for this, changes in education, or are you not prepared? I hope to be the former. That's it for my presentation. Thank you.